Flights will be staying on at least through the end of September. At just after 2 a.m. Eastern, the Senate passed a $1.2 trillion government funding bill, sending it to President Biden to sign. A reminder here, none of this is normal. This should have been wrapped up 6 months ago. But the Republican-led House has struggled to perform its very basic duties, passing a series of stopgap bills that continually needed to be readdressed. If things were not chaotic enough, Speaker Mike Johnson is now at risk of losing his job, with Marjorie Taylor Greene filing a motion to oust Johnson as Speaker moments after the legislation passed in the House. Joining us now, senior congressional reporter for Punchbowl News, Andrew Desiderio, and MSNBC political analyst and special correspondent for Vanity Fair, Molly Jong-Fast. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Andrew, late night on Capitol Hill.
or early morning.
Or early morning. So we've done the tribal dance around, the budget fire, and it seems like everyone has decided, okay, we can do this and go home. What did we get last night? What was in the bill? What was the strategy? How did it come together?
Right. So this was funding for about 70% of the federal government of the discretionary budget. It amounted to $1.2 trillion. Things like the Defense Department, Homeland Security Department, Labor Department, really critical agencies that needed to be funded. And this was done because of the laddered approach that Speaker Johnson took, whereby he divided up these two tranches of funding bills. What it led to in the House of Representatives yesterday was essentially a mutiny, because you saw conservatives start to move against him because they didn't like the product that he put forward, that he negotiated with Democrats. This bill ended up getting a minority of Republicans in the House, and Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, and the Democratic caucus really did have to bail Johnson out, because without them, they would not have passed this legislation. As you see the totals there on the screen, 101 Republican votes, 112 no votes. Again, this could not have happened without Democrats. And I think that is really the reason why you saw Marjorie Taylor Greene start to move against Speaker Johnson. I think it's telling that this sort of mutiny, if you will, has already begun before Johnson even makes a decision on what to do about Ukraine aid. For example, that was supposed to be the most contentious sort of decision upcoming in his speakership. And the fact that this is already happening before he has even telegraphed what he's going to do about Ukraine, I think is a pretty negative sign for the future of Ukraine aid.
To say the least. Can we put back up on the screen what is in the package as far as some overall things? And Molly, I want to highlight two things for you that are on here. So $1 billion in child care and Head Start. Democrats say this has upped this package is more substantial than previous years. Boosts for child care and development block grants. It also increases funding for the National Institutes of Health. Just so many things, Molly. And then the other thing that I thought was notable that is in here that is not on our screen right now, but election security. Democrats are highlighting $55 million for election security grants in this bill. And this is after House Republicans sought to eliminate funding in that area in this proposal just last year. So when we see the numbers, Molly, huge, really big things, but also stuff that folks say is important to them, child care, right? Election security. It's not often talked about when the wins happen, but this seems like a win for the American people.
Yeah, I mean, look, the good news about Republicans fighting with each other, the Burn It Down caucus fighting with what little is left of the normal Republican Party, is that Democrats were able to get a really good budget passed. But I think, like when you heard the speeches on the floor yesterday, the ranking member Rosanna DeLauro was talking about the child care wins, and that there definitely are, and a lot of those poison pill riders did not get through. But I do think ultimately you have a real problem for Mike Johnson, right? The fact that he's already being questioned by Marjorie Taylor Greene so early, the left in this one-person motion to vacate. And, he's really at this point only surviving because of the goodwill of Democrats. Now, whether that continues is anybody's question.
Rosa DeLauro was the name that you were searching for. 7 a.m. is very early in the morning, as it turns out, as I am quickly learning. Here's the thing, Andrew. I want to go back to the supplemental aid package because Johnson keeps saying it's a priority. He hasn't really given a sense of how he plans to put it together. The earliest timeline you're looking at now in a best case scenario is mid-April. We were told weeks ago that the United States has intel that they were doing briefings that Ukraine was rationing munitions, that they simply did not have the resources they needed in order to win this war. You kick the can down the road to April, maybe to May. Republicans may be putting us in a situation that there is no coming back from.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The message you're hearing from the White House and from, frankly, many Republicans in Congress, including Mitch McConnell, the top Senate Republican, is that we are out of time when it comes to Ukraine. You hear Speaker Johnson, you hear some other conservatives suggesting this idea of creating a loan program for Ukraine, trying to get creative sort of with the pay-for mechanisms. Really what those are budget gimmicks, right? And it's meant to sort of placate the Donald Trump wing of the party and sort of minimize the blowback they're going to get as a result of trying to move forward a Ukraine aid package. You see Mitch McConnell coming out week after week now, putting pressure on Speaker Johnson to pass the Senate bill, which funded Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, of course, as well. So the fact that Mitch McConnell, who usually takes a hands-off approach when it comes to the House, says, look, I'm not going to tell the House what to do. The fact that he is coming out so forcefully and putting overt pressure on Speaker Johnson to pass the Senate bill, I think is a reflection of that frustration you're seeing, not just at the White House, not just with Democratic leaders, but also with people like Mitch McConnell who really want to get this done.
Molly, how do you assess the politics here, looking at some of what we were just saying about the moves by McConnell, putting a little pressure on the House, his then leaving, getting this done? What does the political landscape look like for those running in this election cycle? The administration's posturing around this deal to get it, to get it out the door. How do you see that setting up for the Biden administration and for Republicans and Trump to make the case to the American people about the nation's budget, which is 7 months past due?
Right. I mean, look, Republicans have put themselves in a really bad situation here, and you're seeing more and more. This Republican on Republican violence in the House does not serve them when they want to try to make the case that they should continue to keep it. And as they're sort of hemorrhaging members, I mean, Ken Buck, Mike Gallagher, Ken Buck made this sort of opaque comment that there might be more people leaving. And so, when you have a party that can't get along with each other, that's a very good opening for Democrats. And I think that what's interesting about Biden is that he really has been doing this a very long time. And he was a senator for a very, very long time. So he does know about the sort of calculus of how to get things done in Washington. And so this kind of thing is really where he excels.
It's strange. Can we just say that it's strange? Why are all these members of Congress leaving in the middle? It's just strange, honey. It's strange. And I think it just further cements how Mike Johnson actually does not have a hold on his caucus. I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm the Speaker of the House, I'm not letting my people get up out of here in a consequential election season when we can barely fund the government and do our jobs. It's literally like amateur day at the OK Corral, Andrew. And I mean, am I making it up?
No, I mean, it's miserable to be in Congress right now, to be in the House of Representatives in particular, and to be in the House Republican Conference. Molly just mentioned someone like Mike Gallagher, who had already announced he's not seeking re-election. He's a younger Republican. He's more national security focused. He was once touted as the future of the party. Not only is he not running for re-election, he announced the other day that he's actually calling it quits early and is going to leave Congress sometime sometime in April.
Allegedly to take a job with a company that Peter Thiel run. I mean, like.
Right. So those opportunities are much more, not only much more lucrative, but much more attractive for members of Congress. And look, he's a guy who chairs the Select Committee on China, which was this bipartisan effort that was stood up by then Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And he's leaving that powerful position in the middle of this Congress, right after they passed that big legislation on the forced divestiture of TikTok, for example. He's not even staying to see that through. I think it's just a reflection of the fact that it's miserable for a lot of people to be in Congress right now, to the point where they don't even want to serve out the rest of their term.
Well, not only
Terrible
that, but the
place to
interesting
be.
thing about his departure is that he's leaving in such a untimely way that they can't fill his seat under the state law because they're past the deadline to fill it. So that seat will stay open until next January, meaning Johnson has one less member in the House.
I mean, the math might end up making Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker prior to an election.
Attrition.
You know, one thing we've been talking about, and I know we might have to go soon, but it's early, so what the heck? There were some immigration provisions in this bill. The Washington Post, Jacob Bogage, he published this morning and said the legislation would increase funding for immigration and customs enforcement to support about 42,000 beds in detention facilities. It would fund 22,000 Border Patrol agents, also cut U.S. contributions by 20% to non-governmental organizations that provide services for new arrivals to the country. I feel like that last part is probably not as helpful. But all this talk about immigration, all this talk about border security, Mike Johnson not putting a supplemental on the floor because previously it was tied to border security, and now we've got some border security provisions in the bill.
Yeah, I think that was important, you know, especially because Republicans killed the bipartisan border security bill a couple of months ago, mostly at the behest, or I guess all of at the behest of Donald Trump. And this was something that was negotiated up until the last minute because they were actually considering just doing a continuing resolution, the same appropriations levels for the rest of this fiscal year, which would have been unfathomable a couple of months ago when they were in the heat of negotiating this bipartisan border security effort. So, you know, both sides really did get things that they can tout, but, you know, it really is causing political problems right now for Speaker Johnson.
To say the least.